Hey guys, I had a baby. Can you tell by my bloodshot eyes? I really wanted to have a great hook for this video. The simple truth is, I didn't have it in me. And the other simple truth is, I just spent about half an hour recording only to have all of those recordings disappear. So, this is round two of this video. And you know what? I'm still here because I want to offer any value I can. And I know that the algorithm already is chiding me for missing last week. But, sorry, not sorry, was having a baby and super happy about that. So I'm going to dive right in to this video. So I wanted to talk about some things that are on my mind, reflecting on the last 3 pregnancies now that my wife and I have gone through in different life stages, very close together technically, but still felt like very different life stages. And I wanted to share some thoughts that I hoped would be helpful. And the first thing I want to do is start off with a confession. I don't truly think, looking back, that we had a sufficient emergency fund for any of the pregnancies, any of the births of our children. And you know what? It turned out okay, and I'm glad. I still wish, looking back, that we had been a little bit more prepared, but that's not always the situation with having kids. And I do want to go back to something that my father told me shortly after my wife and I got married, before we were having the kids conversation. But my dad told me to not wait for the perfect financial situation to start having kids if that's what we wanted to do, because frankly, that perfect situation is so rarely going to happen. And so for us, our first child wasn't necessarily planned. Thank goodness we were in a place where we could handle it. But we had just drained a lot of our savings to get into our first house, the house that we're currently in right now. And of course, that turned out to be a great opportunity, a great financial decision. And yet, it was still scary when we found ourselves pregnant and approaching birth while COVID was going down. So a few months into the pregnancy, COVID happened, and I am so thankful that my job wasn't affected, in the sense that I was employed the whole time. It was definitely affected in other ways. And Rachel continued to work as hard as she could through that as a nurse. So obviously very needed. She helped a lot, did a lot of great things. But there was definitely some things that happened that made that tough. And that was, especially towards the end of the pregnancy, working in a hospital that was full of COVID, and besides COVID, was also just a stressful environment for her. We needed to make a change for her sanity and safety and the safety of the child. And so she went to a lower paying job and fewer hours, more part-time. And it was a great situation. It was the right move. And yet I wish we had pivoted a little bit better. I've mentioned that before. But again, we're not looking for perfection when it comes to the financial situation. And so that is one thing that I would like to think about. I don't remember what our emergency fund situation was with our second child. But I do know that it was a lot better this time around, as you would hope. This one was more planned, and so we were able to have a last hurrah with our friends, go on a cruise with them, and then once Rachel was pregnant, I was already working on stockpiling cash. I do think that when it comes to being pregnant and approaching the birth of a child, I align more on the Dave Ramsey philosophy of things, where you kind of shut everything else down, even in some cases, personally, not always, but in some cases, shutting down your employer match in order to stockpile cash, because it is so uncertain what that cost is going to be. You don't know what complications may happen. And so if you're considering having a child, or in the future, if you think about it, I would consider stopping things and stockpiling cash until the baby arrives. And so that more or less is what we were doing. But we did find three things that were coming at us that we had to navigate in terms of our personal position, but also our financial position. The first thing was that we needed a vehicle that would fit 3 car seats, as we still have 3 kids that are young enough to need car seats. And that is something that past Bobby, when he bought the first family car, didn't think far enough ahead about. And while we previously had thought, oh no, we'll never be a minivan family, we found ourselves dreaming of having a minivan. It was a dream of ours. We drew one on a piece of paper. We were praying for it. We were making it one of our financial goals. And so that's one of the things we had to navigate. Was we have this pile of cash that we've been building, right? And so technically, the van we ended up getting, possibly we could have paid for it in cash. However, I knew that I wanted to keep that cash flexible because of the 2 other factors we're going to talk about. But I noticed that I made a strategic decision based on our entire context to finance a vehicle rather than pay in cash. And there are some schools of thought that would really say, hey, Bobby, you did it wrong there, because you really should have waited till you could pay in cash. And I don't fault them for that. That's a way to go. But I just knew for us in our context, and that was what was right for us. And so I ended up financing it for now, because it leaves that pile of cash flexible for other things that might come up. And hopefully, when the dust settles, when Rachel's back at work, we can actually crush that pretty quickly. And if we don't want that debt hanging over us, we can get it out of our lives. But you never know what's going to happen, as I say. So I wanted to keep that cash flexible. So what was the second thing? The second thing was that Rachel was not going to be able to work for 3 months after having the child. And when I say not be able to, I mean that it is her priority, our priority, that she be able to spend as much time as possible taking care of the baby, bonding with the baby. And even though she only works 1 day a week, obviously 12 hours or longer without mama around is not a great situation in those early months. And thank goodness we're in a position, I know not everybody is, where she could take that time. The thing is, Rachel is PRN, which means she doesn't have any PTO. So this is going to be 3 months of unpaid time for her. And even though she works 1 day a week, her hourly rate still packs a punch in our budget. So that was definitely something I had to consider, is, are we going to need to pull some of that cash to supplement our budget so that we can keep afloat during this time? And so that was the other thing I had in mind. And the last thing, probably not the last thing, but the last thing I can think of here is, of course, the medical bills. Because while you would think that I would have a detailed memory and detailed record of what we paid for the last 2 children, for some reason, every time those bills came, there were so many and so confusing that I never really got a clear picture of the whys and wherefores and exactly how much we paid. I had a round figure in my head of like $5,000, but I wasn't sure. And so I knew that we needed to have that cash on hand, again, because I knew there was going to be minimums that we had to pay. And in fact, we had to pay $1,000 before they would even discharge us. So that was something that I had to think about with this cash that really honestly wasn't as beefy as I would like it. I had to think about all these factors that we needed instead of, a few months before the baby comes, slapping a bunch of cash on the table to buy a car, and then finding ourselves really crunched when these other expenses came. And so always, my dad always talks about, I want to say constant vigilance, but that's Mad-Eye Moody from Harry Potter. Situational awareness. There we go, Dad. I got there eventually. Situational awareness when you're driving. That was what he taught me. So always, as you're driving forward, being aware of what's on your side, what's in the rearview mirror, as well as what's ahead. And so you want to have situational awareness with your finances. So it's not just the obvious thing that's coming up, it's all the things that might happen. And again, I don't want that to paralyze you, but you can be cautious. You can be mindful of all these things. So what were the other things that were on my mind during this year or so leading up to the baby being born? Yes, I know that it's a 9-month pregnancy. I'm factoring in the time that we were planning. A few things were, of course, starting this business, this coaching business, not to mention this YouTube channel. That was definitely something that was on my heart and mind. And frankly, I couldn't not step into it. But it was months of groundwork before I pulled the trigger on launching this channel, really putting my coaching services out there. And I had to be mindful of the financial investment I made in it. Now, one of the great things about financial coaching or coaching in general is there doesn't necessarily need to be a huge financial front load to it, but I still had to be mindful of the things that I wanted versus the things that I needed. I had to be smart with resource allocation, and that goes beyond just money. Time is definitely a factor. I mean, I'm going into almost midnight, not really, but almost for me, almost midnight, working on this video. And that's because I have 2 other kids that need care, even as my wife is taking care of the baby. And of course, we're all taking care of everybody. But time is, to quote Linkin Park, a valuable thing and can be as impactful as finances. But this business, I really feel like I can help people. And so I wanted to make it enough of a priority that I was putting some resources behind it. Not a ton, but some. So that is one of the other things that I was considering. The other was just my day job. I like my work. I like what I do. And, I'm very fortunate. I was already making more than I expected to earn as someone who doesn't have a college degree. And just before, literally just before I went out to have this baby, God was good, and I got a promotion with a pay raise that is going to help us out a ton. And so that's huge. And so just being grateful for those things, being mindful of them, and again, God's going to take care of you. You may or may not believe that. But if you're in the situation where you've got a baby on the way and you don't know what's going to happen, can I just ask you, trust. Just trust. And it doesn't always take the form of a pay raise. It doesn't always take the form of an easy pregnancy, an easy birth. Maybe it comes in the form of a family member or friends that come alongside you. God, we've had that as well. Just so many blessings. People loving on us. And I'm so thankful for that. Those are the things you cannot measure in money. You absolutely cannot. And so when I say that there's more to this life than dollars and cents, know that I believe it. And our dollars and cents are a tool that we can use to bless others. So I hope that this was helpful, gave you some things to think about, and it can apply to not just having a child. It can apply to other huge life decisions. I would love for you to become so familiar with finances and your finances that you can finesse, that you can triage and prioritize based on your philosophy of money, based on your understanding of what is best financially. I'm never going to argue with somebody who is just completely against debt for reasons that are important to them. You know, I don't love debt, of course, but I want to work with you to develop that philosophy, that understanding, so that you can make those strategic decisions as they come, because you're not always going to be in ideal circumstances, but you can make the best of them the more you know, right? And so if you're wrestling with something, I hope that you will reach out to somebody and talk it through. And like I said, I hope to have a whole other video about specifically breaking down the medical bills that come from this birth. I'm hoping to do a much better job of really understanding where the bills are coming from and how much we're paying. And I hope that I can give you some more insight into that specifically. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for bearing with me. I know that this is unscripted and so less snappy, but I really enjoy talking as though I'm talking to you guys, because really, that's why I'm here. I want to connect with y'all about finances, something that's very isolating for a lot of people. You don't have to be isolated. You don't have to be alone in this journey. So I hope you'll check out newstoryfinancial.com and you will check out the rest of these videos on this channel. Look for next week's video. Next week's going to be much more of a normal financial story hour video, if there is such a thing at this point. And I hope that you will continue to tune in. I hope that you'll subscribe and like and comment. Tell me, what you think. What do you think? What are some of the things you went through if you've had children? Or what are some of the things that I didn't mention? Because there's a ton that I didn't mention. I really hope to hear from you guys. So remember, you can change your story. I'll see you in the next video.